And fear comes because of the lack of knowledge. Okay, so, and that's why I have a show, because I came to a country that they love dogs, but they didn't know dogs.
Right.
So my goal for the world is to make a knowledgeable dog lover world.
Cesar Millan was a powerhouse on TV, turning the world's most terrifying aggressive dogs into submissive family pets. But while millions worshipped his legendary composure at home, a hidden, terrible mess was eating away at his empire from the inside out. The dog whisperer didn't just end. It completely fell apart under an unsettling secret hatred, draining lawsuits, and a midnight emergency that almost cost Cesar his life. How did the world's ultimate pack leader completely lose control of his own world? Let's pull back the curtain on the chilling, untold truth behind the rise and sudden destruction of a global phenomenon. The show nobody cared about at first. For years, Cesar Millan's name was on everyone's lips. If you flipped your channels back in 2008, chances were you were going to see him standing in front of some aggressive dog that nobody else could control. The family would be panicking, the dog would be losing its mind, and Cesar would walk in completely calm, like it was nothing. Then somehow, a few minutes later, the dog would calm down like a switch had been flipped. Millions of people watched in disbelief, wondering how he kept pulling it off. His show, Dog Whisperer, became one of the biggest reality shows on television, and millions of families started trying his methods at home because they genuinely believed he had a supernatural power when it came to animals. You see, when Dog Whisperer with Cesar Millan first came out in 2004, very few people in television actually expected it to turn into a global sensation. The idea sounded almost too simple to succeed. Each episode followed the same pattern. A dog had become uncontrollable inside a home, the family was overwhelmed, and then Cesar Millan would arrive to restore calm and balance in real time. What made the concept stand out was not just the dogs, but the way Cesar worked with them. He had already been gaining attention in Los Angeles for his ability to handle difficult and even celebrity pets. A production company noticed those results and saw something bigger than local training sessions. They realized this approach could become a series. That is how the show concept was built and later turned into a full television production titled Dog Whisperer with Cesar Millan. The series officially premiered in September 2004 on the National Geographic Channel, introducing his methods to a much wider audience and quickly turning everyday dog behavior problems into a must-watch TV show. Over time, the show became closely associated with Dog Whisperer with Cesar Millan and helped push Cesar into international fame, shaping how millions of viewers thought about dog psychology and training. But the truth is, the network did not treat the show like some big television series at first. In fact, they barely promoted it. The episodes were short, the budget looked small, and the show was buried in an afternoon time slot where most people probably missed it completely. It looked more like one of those random programs you stumble across while flipping channels than something that would eventually take over television. Still, something about Cesar immediately grabbed people's attention. Families watching at home had never really seen anyone like him before. One minute, a dog would be barking, lunging, and completely terrifying its owners. Then Cesar would walk into the house, calm as ever, barely raise his voice, and somehow the energy in the room would completely change. People could not stop talking about it because it did not feel staged. It felt real. And this is exactly what kept the show afloat at first. Since the network was not doing much to push it, regular people were. Friends started recommending it to each other. Neighbors were telling neighbors to tune in. Families were sitting together, watching these chaotic dogs suddenly calm down right in front of them. By the second season, National Geographic realized they had something much bigger on their hands than they originally thought. The episodes became longer, the budget increased, and the show was moved into prime time. Within a few years, Dog Whisperer was drawing millions of viewers each week and airing in countries around the world. The producers also understood how to make the show feel emotional and dramatic without making it look fake. Before this, most dog training programs felt slow and clinical, but Dog Whisperer felt completely different. The music was intense. The editing made every situation feel urgent. Every episode felt like watching a real-life rescue unfold step by step. But before we get into how this television empire eventually collapsed, we first have to understand how Cesar Millan built it in the first place. Because the journey that took a broke, undocumented kid from Mexico all the way into Hollywood boardrooms was far more dangerous and far more unbelievable than anything people ever saw on TV. The kid from Mexico who crossed a border with $100. You see, long before the fame, Cesar was just a broke young man from Mexico trying to survive in America with almost nothing to his name. In 1990, when he was only 21 years old, he arrived near the Tijuana border carrying almost nothing with him. He could not speak English, nor did he know a single soul in the United States, and the only money in his pocket was $100. His father had managed to scrape together for him before he left home. Now, crossing the border back then was not just about trying to climb a fence. The whole area was incredibly dangerous and lawless. It was full of brutal cartels and local criminals who actively hunted down migrants in the bushes. Cesar knew people routinely got robbed, kidnapped, or even killed out there. It was a total life-or-death situation, but he wanted to get to California so badly that he just did not care about the risk. So he did something so crazy, it actually worked. He spent hours actively hunting down the United States Border Patrol. He realized that getting arrested by American agents was a luxury compared to what the cartels would do to him in the dark. He knew that if the Border Patrol picked him up, they would at least give him some food, water, and a safe place to rest before they sent him back. After trying over and over again, he finally slipped through without getting caught. But the $100 he had was exhausted in just a few days, and before long, Cesar was homeless in San Diego, trying to figure out how to survive in a country where he could barely communicate with people. He had to clean out trash from dirty alleys, eat food out of dumpsters, and sleep on the hard concrete floor of a dog kennel, where he finally begged his way into a low-paying grooming job. Now, back on the farm where Cesar grew up, kids used to make fun of him constantly and call him the dog boy because he would skip school just to follow stray dogs around dirt roads and fields. People around him thought it was weird, but that farm is exactly where Cesar discovered his unique gift. While everyone else would yell, throw rocks, or run away from mean dogs, Cesar noticed that if he just stayed completely calm and quiet, the dogs would calm down too. He realized that dogs do not care about the words you say. They read your body language and energy. This simple observation became the entire foundation of what later made him famous. And when Cesar finally brought this same mindset to Los Angeles, people immediately noticed he was different from every other dog trainer. He did not sound polished or overly scientific. He sounded like somebody who had learned everything through survival and real-life experience. Producers loved it, audiences loved it, and before long, Hollywood completely embraced him. But surviving the cartels was nothing compared to the jaw-dropping ultimatum a Hollywood superstar dropped on his desk. The secret deal with Jada Pinkett Smith. Now, when Cesar first got to Los Angeles, there was no TV deal waiting for him. Nobody in Hollywood knew his name yet, and honestly, he was just trying to survive. He took small jobs grooming difficult dogs, cleaning kennels, and walking pets around East Los Angeles. But even back then, people started noticing there was something unusual about him. Cesar would walk through the streets with huge packs of dogs, including pit bulls and Rottweilers, and somehow every single animal stayed calm beside him without leashes or chaos breaking out. Neighbors would stop and stare because it did not look normal at all. As word spread, more people started calling him for help with aggressive dogs nobody else could handle. Soon, wealthy pet owners in Beverly Hills were hearing about the calm trainer from Mexico, who could soothe almost any animal. His reputation eventually connected him to Jada Pinkett Smith. One day, Jada watched Cesar work with a dog, and she immediately saw that he had something special. It was not just the way he handled animals. It was the confidence, the calm energy, and the way dogs responded to him almost instantly. But while Jada believed in his talent, she also saw the biggest challenge standing in his way. Cesar barely spoke English. He had the skills and the personality to become successful, but he struggled to communicate clearly with people in Hollywood. According to Cesar, Jada told him something that stayed with him for years. She said that if he wanted a real future on television, he needed to fully learn English and stop relying on broken conversations and translations in his head. The problem was that Cesar could not afford expensive classes. So Jada decided to help him by paying for a private English tutor out of her own pocket. From that point on, he became completely focused on learning the language. He studied constantly and pushed himself to improve every day. In fact, he even stayed away from Spanish-speaking environments for a while because he wanted to force himself to think and communicate in English faster. It wasn't easy at first, but before long, he became more comfortable speaking. This decision changed everything for Cesar. The same man who had once been homeless and struggling to survive suddenly found himself sitting in meetings with television producers and wealthy clients. Big producers realized they had something people would pay attention to. Cesar Millan was not just another dog trainer anymore. He was becoming one of the most recognizable faces on TV. But even though his rise looked smooth from the outside, things almost fell apart before they really began. Because the moment Hollywood finally gave Cesar his own platform, the response was not what anybody expected. While millions of everyday viewers were falling in love with the show, a highly dangerous group of Ivy League critics was quietly plotting a scientific assassination on his entire empire. The day the scientists lost their minds. As Cesar's fame kept growing, his actual methods were being put under a microscope. The core of his entire philosophy was built on a concept he called dominance theory. Cesar firmly believed and preached on every single episode that dogs are pack animals that think in a strict hierarchy. In his world, if a dog is biting your furniture, attacking neighbors, or growling at your kids, it is because you have failed to establish yourself as the alpha. You left a leadership vacuum, and the dog stepped up to fill it. To fix this, Cesar would use physical corrections, such as alpha rolls, where he pinned a dog on its back, or quick finger kicks to the neck to force the animal into a submissive state. To the average viewer at home, watching a wild dog suddenly go silent and submissive looked like pure, beautiful magic. But while regular viewers were fascinated by what they were seeing on TV, a completely different reaction was happening behind the scenes. A lot of Ivy League animal behaviorists and veterinarians were losing their minds over Cesar's methods. They argued that some of the techniques he used relied too heavily on fear and submission instead of trust and positive reinforcement. In fact, several experts publicly warned that people copying those methods at home could accidentally make certain dogs even more aggressive. To them, Cesar wasn't the savior people on TV made him out to be. They believed he was pushing ideas that the scientific world had already moved on from years earlier. And as he became more famous, the backlash became more intense. The biggest problem centered around Cesar's belief that dogs constantly need an alpha leader controlling them. According to many veterinarians and behavior experts, newer studies have shown that dogs respond better to trust, structure, and positive reinforcement instead of fear or physical dominance. So while millions of viewers were watching Cesar calm aggressive dogs in minutes and calling it genius, a growing number of scientists were looking at the same footage and seeing something completely different. As the backlash kept growing, the criticism around Cesar stopped being just a debate online. It started turning into a serious problem for the network behind the show. In 2006, the American Humane Association publicly pushed back against Dog Whisperer and called some of Cesar's techniques harsh and outdated. Then, a few years later, the American Veterinary Society of Animal Behavior released another warning, arguing that training dogs through fear or dominance could actually make aggressive behavior worse over time instead of fixing it. And this is where things really became messy for Cesar. Suddenly, respected veterinarians, animal experts, and television critics were all questioning the same thing at once. Meanwhile, Cesar completely disagreed with all of it. From his point of view, these critics were sitting in classrooms talking theory, while he was the one walking into real homes dealing with dangerous dogs face to face. He kept arguing that the techniques worked because people could literally see the results with their own eyes on television. And honestly, that is why so many fans stayed loyal to him. They watched aggressive dogs calm down right in front of the camera. So to them, the criticism sounded disconnected from reality. But even though the audience still loved him, the pressure around the show was getting too intense to ignore. In 2012, things became even more uncomfortable when Cesar appeared on British TV with host Alan Titchmarsh. During the interview, clips of Cesar correcting dogs were played on screen, and Alan openly challenged him about whether some of the physical techniques crossed the line. The conversation quickly turned tense, and suddenly, this was no longer just a small disagreement inside the dog training world. The controversy had gone fully viral. And once this happens, networks, executives, and sponsors start getting nervous. Because no matter how successful a show is, the second people start accusing it of being dangerous, everything changes. The scientific war was brutal, but it was nothing compared to what happened when a single bloody incident on camera brought a convoy of police cruisers straight to Cesar's front door. The infamous pig incident. At first, the backlash against Cesar mostly stayed inside the world of scientists, trainers, and animal experts. There were heated debates, angry opinion pieces, and constant criticism from people who believed his methods were too aggressive. But networks like National Geographic were not about to pull the plug on one of their biggest money-making shows just because experts were upset. As long as millions of people kept tuning in every week, the show kept running. However, things started getting a lot more serious once the controversy moved out of academic arguments and straight into the legal world. In 2012, Cesar suddenly found himself dealing with a lawsuit from a wealthy dog owner who claimed their pet had been badly injured and emotionally traumatized during a stay at his training facility. Cesar's team strongly pushed back against those accusations, and the details became heavily disputed almost immediately. Still, the damage was already done. You see, in television, lawsuits change everything. The moment lawyers, insurance companies, and corporate executives start seeing words like animal injury attached to a hit show, they start to panic behind closed doors. And this panic had a lot to do with money because TV shows survive. After all, big companies pay millions for advertising. Pet food brands, pharmaceutical companies, and major retailers all had their logos attached to Cesar's image. The last thing those corporations wanted was to see their commercials running beside headlines accusing a famous dog trainer of harming animals. So while viewers at home were still enjoying the show, executives inside National Geographic were quietly watching the situation get more dangerous by the month. Every controversy added another layer of pressure. But that's not all. The real explosion came later during Cesar's follow-up series, Cesar 911. In one episode, Cesar was working with a highly aggressive French bulldog named Simon, a dog that already had a history of attacking other animals. During the training session, Cesar introduced the dog to a group of pigs inside an open pen. At first, it looked like a normal exercise, but before anyone realized, the situation went wrong. In a split second, Simon broke free and charged directly at one of the pigs. The dog clamped onto the pig's ear while cameras kept rolling, and the animal immediately started squealing in panic. Crew members rushed in trying to separate them as blood became visible on screen. The moment aired on television, and almost instantly, the internet exploded. Animal rights activists were furious. Social media turned into complete chaos. Online petitions demanding the show be canceled spread everywhere within days, pulling in hundreds of thousands of signatures. The backlash became so intense that local authorities eventually showed up at Cesar's California ranch with a search warrant connected to an animal cruelty investigation. And just like that, the man once celebrated as America's most famous dog trainer was being treated like a possible criminal suspect. News stations ran non-stop coverage about the investigation, and critics who had been warning about his methods for years felt completely vindicated. For weeks, major news networks ran non-stop headlines about a potential criminal case against the world's most famous dog trainer. Even though investigators eventually cleared Cesar of all criminal charges, concluding it was a genuine accident during a live training exercise, the terrifying incident sent absolute shockwaves through the executive offices at National Geographic. Every new episode was officially becoming a radioactive PR bomb that could detonate at any moment. You see, before the pig incident, Cesar's controversies felt survivable because the ratings were untouchable. But now, the police and lawyers were running the show. The narrative was completely out of control. As the network scrambled to put out the public relations fire, the cameras kept rolling on a complete lie. Because what the public didn't know was that the real cracks didn't start on TV. To understand how the world's most confident pack leader lost control of his empire in 2012, we have to rewind the tape to a night in 2010, the exact moment his entire private world was violently ripped away from him. The year the pack leader lost everything at once. While Cesar was busy defending himself on television and fighting off criticism from scientists, his personal life was quietly falling apart behind the scenes. In February 2010, his famous pit bull, Daddy, passed away at 16 years old. Now, if you watched Dog Whisperer back then, you already know Daddy was not just another dog. It was a huge part of Cesar's entire world. In many ways, Daddy became the emotional center of the show. Whenever Cesar worked with dangerous dogs that were barking, lunging, or completely out of control, Daddy would calmly walk into the room like nothing bothered him. He doesn't bark or panic. He just enters with a calm energy that somehow makes other dogs calm down almost immediately. Viewers loved watching it because it felt almost unreal. So when Daddy passed away, it completely crushed Cesar emotionally. And before he even had time to properly deal with that grief, another major blow landed just a few months later. His wife of 16 years decided to leave and officially filed for divorce. Just like that, the private life that had kept him grounded through all the chaos of fame started breaking apart too. To make things even worse, the divorce also turned into a custody battle over their two sons. You have to remember how strange this looked from the outside. Here was a man making millions teaching people how to become calm, confident leaders in their own homes, yet behind closed doors, his own life was unraveling. The contrast became impossible for him to ignore. One minute, he was filming episodes, giving advice and helping families fix their dogs. The next minute, he was going home to an empty house, living with an unbelievable amount of pain. Cesar later admitted that this period pushed him into a deep depression. He stopped eating properly, lost a significant amount of weight, and started feeling like he had completely failed as a husband, a father, and a person. The pressure became so overwhelming that one night in 2010, he attempted to end it all by overdosing on pills. Thankfully, a family member found him in time and rushed him to the hospital, where doctors were able to save him. This was a life-changing moment for him. When Cesar woke up, he realized he had reached the absolute lowest point of his life. Later on, he said he refused to stay trapped in that darkness. Instead, he tried rebuilding himself the same way he had survived every other brutal chapter of his life, through discipline, work, and pure determination. He threw himself into exercise, focused on recovery, and slowly tried to regain control of his mental health. Cesar miraculously survived his darkest night, but his TV show was practically on life support. Behind closed doors, corporate executives were already sharpening the knife to cut him loose. The real reason they pulled the plug. In September 2012, Cesar Millan shared a calm and respectful message on Facebook announcing that Dog Whisperer was coming to an end after 9 seasons and over 160 episodes. This may have looked like a peaceful and mutual decision where both sides simply felt the time had come to move on. But in Hollywood, endings like that are rarely as simple as they appear, because public statements are usually polished in a way that hides the tension building behind the scenes. By that time, the pressure around the show had become impossible to ignore. The show continues to make headlines for all the wrong reasons, and for a network like National Geographic, which built its reputation on science and trust, that kind of controversy created a growing conflict that never really settled down. But that's not all. At the time, things were also changing business-wise. After nearly a decade on air, production costs had risen. Salaries and logistics had become more expensive. Even though the audience was still strong, the ratings were no longer growing the way they once had, which is often a turning point for long-running television shows. At some point, the executives had to sit down and ask themselves whether the show was still worth the risk. Cesar himself went through an emotionally exhausting period marked by loss, divorce, and mental health struggles. It was all too much on him, and he was already exhausted. So they made the difficult decision to end the show. In the end, the show did not end because of one single event, but because all of these pressures built up over time until continuing simply no longer made sense for anyone involved. And what looked like a clean ending on the surface was really the result of years of mounting strain finally reaching its limit. Present life of Cesar Millan. When the final episode of Dog Whisperer aired, a lot of people in the television industry quietly assumed that Cesar Millan had reached the end of his run. After years of fame, controversy, and personal struggles, many thought he would step away from the spotlight, settle into a quieter life, and slowly become another former reality television star people only remembered from old reruns. But instead of disappearing, Cesar moved in the opposite direction and pushed himself back into the public eye in a much more direct and personal way. Rather than depending on television networks, producers, and carefully edited episodes, he decided to take his work straight to live audiences, which eventually led to the launch of Cesar Millan Live. The idea was far riskier than television because there were no second takes, no editing room fixes, and no way to soften mistakes afterward. It was just Cesar standing in front of thousands of people with real dogs brought onto the stage from different cities, many of them dealing with unpredictable behavior that could change in seconds. That pressure created an intense atmosphere because every reaction happened live, meaning the audience witnessed everything exactly as it unfolded. What made the tour even more impressive was the fact that the uncertainty became part of the attraction. Cesar had to study a dog's energy almost immediately and react in real time without knowing exactly what might happen next. At any moment, a dog could panic, become aggressive, or completely ignore commands, and there would be nowhere to hide if things went wrong. Even with that risk hanging over every performance, the tour became a major success and sold out venues across different parts of the world, proving that his connection with audiences had survived far beyond television. As entertainment slowly shifted away from cable television and toward digital platforms, Cesar adapted once again by building a stronger online presence instead of waiting for networks to call him back. He launched a YouTube channel where he could speak directly to pet owners without producers shaping the message around him. And that move helped him connect with a younger audience that barely watched traditional television anymore. Through shorter and more practical videos, he began focusing on everyday problems dog owners deal with, including anxiety, fear, aggression, and behavioral issues caused by modern lifestyles where pets spend long hours alone at home. Over time, the channel grew into a massive platform followed by millions of people around the world. Eventually, he returned to TV with Better Human, Better Dog, and viewers quickly noticed a softer and more reflective side of his approach. The earlier image, built around dominance and control, gradually gave way to a message that focused more on emotional balance between owners and their pets. Instead of talking only about correcting dogs, Cesar began emphasizing how fear, stress, anxiety, and confusion inside a home often shape an animal's behavior. In many ways, he shifted from simply training dogs to helping people better understand themselves and the energy they bring into their relationships with animals. This is where his story stands today. Not as a forgotten celebrity or someone completely erased by controversy, but as a man who managed to reinvent himself multiple times while carrying enormous pressure behind the scenes. Even after losing the show that made him famous, he found new ways to stay relevant, rebuild his audience, and continue shaping conversations about dogs and human behavior in a completely different media landscape. And this question lingers. Is Cesar Millan actually a genius who mastered the minds of animals? Or was he just a broken human being trying to survive a wild world? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you find this breakdown eye-opening, make sure to hit that like button, share it with another dog lover, and subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive into TV's biggest secrets.